There's a place unlike any other in the world, Panama's Barro Colorado Island, known as BCI to the scientists who journey here. A protected realm in the middle of the Panama Canal, BCI is home to the Smithsonian's Tropical Research Institute. Scientists come to this island from all over the globe to unravel the mysteries of life in the tropical forest. It is an adventure beyond the reach of one person or one lifetime.
BCI is a very special place. For me, just because the more I come here, the more familiar I get with the island. It's just home, it's comfortable, it's exciting.
I think Barro Colorado Island offers for me a lot of things that I would not find in any other place. It's a really highly diverse forest. The research facilities are just fantastic. You come there, you go out and do your work. And Barro Colorado Island is protected so that your work is not disturbed at all.
I discover things. In the tropics, you may be a person who's discovered something that not a single human being in the history of the world has bothered to notice.
Here unfolds one of nature's great puzzles. How does the tropical forest manage to support such a remarkable community of life and sustain itself at the same time? One thing is certain. At the heart of it all are the trees. A single tree, as it drives towards the light, affects the lives of countless creatures. But life is a struggle here for every creature, and the odds that any one seed will grow into a titan are astronomical. It takes luck and strategy to make it to the top. For people, getting to the top always requires some special precautions. Biologist Deidre McLaren has learned to seek the forest's answers on its own terms. Even if it means following her slingshot all the way up into the crown of one of the forest's giants. This is Dipteryx, one of the great ones. It rises head and shoulders above the ocean of leaves around it, more than 100 feet tall. From its majestic flowers will come fruit, and from the fruit, perhaps an offspring. It will survive to take the place of its parent among a procession of giants. Climbing has taught Deidre to respect trees as individuals.
Since I've started climbing, I like Dipteryx because it's a beautiful tree, it's emergent, it comes above all the rest of the trees. They often have great views, and the wood is really hard and solid. I feel safe climbing a Dipteryx. You know, the chainsaws won't cut down a Dipteryx. I have a lot of different emotions associated with actually climbing a tree. One of them is familiarity. If it's a tree that I've climbed before, I feel comfortable. It's a very satisfying sort of feeling to make a good ascent. If it's a tree that I haven't climbed before, or it's given me troubles, or I'm worried about a branch, then it can be very nerve-wracking.
Deidre climbs into the canopy to release a coati, a tropical cousin of the raccoon.
I know you.
She captures coatis just to let them go.
Calm down, calm down. I have caught you 15 times, and you always thrash around. Just wait a second.
She's curious how an animal who isn't a born climber manages to survive 10 stories up.
I think coatis are really interesting as climbing mammals because they're not perfect. They're kind of clumsy. They're not graceful leapers. They can't hang by their tail. They don't have exquisitely manipulative hands to grasp onto branches, but they do really well. One of the things that really surprised me was that they actually will jump quite a far distance going down. It'll launch itself into a tree, and it doesn't really know where it's going to grab on. It just, I think, assumes that it'll be able to find something when it hits that crown.
The coati has a lot of company up here, with good reason. The canopy is the forest's powerhouse. This is where leaves transform light into the stuff of life itself. The canopy creates its own world with lands and waters, prey and predators. It overflows with flowers, greenery, and fruit, food for all who can live at these heights. Earthbound for years, scientists could only guess what went on up here until now.
The canopy is the last frontier on Earth, and it's only been the last 10 or 15 years that people have really gotten up into the trees and started looking at the insects and looking at the leaves. And actually there still hasn't been that much mammal work up in the canopy, but it's a different life zone. It's like going to the bottom of the ocean, and you can't tell what's up here from working on the ground, and it's different.
Bold researchers like Deidre are proving how different the tropical forest is from our preconceptions of the jungle. For one thing, it is not always steamy and wet. Like many tropical forests, BCI has a long dry season. Food is now becoming scarce. Even coatis, who will eat just about anything, are hard-pressed to fill their bellies. They gather under the majestic dipteryx waiting. Now, when they need it most, the tree will bear its fruit. For dipteryx, this is the beginning of the long struggle to reproduce. Howler monkeys gather in its crown. Here is a banquet that will stave off hunger for many. The timing is crucial. By fruiting during the dry season, the dipteryx guarantees that many will gather for the feast. Oddly enough, the tree wants its fruit to be eaten, even though each fruit contains a seed that could bring forth the next generation. But why? All these capuchin monkeys know is that food is nearly at hand, and if enough of them arrive, they could drive the howlers from this nutritious meal. What scientists have discovered is the fruit is actually an expensive bribe. If animals take it, they may carry the seed locked inside far from the parent tree. The further away the seed gets, the better its chance of surviving. With ripening fruit all around them, the canopy animals can now afford to be finicky eaters. Once they've had the ripest bit, they simply drop the fruit and move on to the next. But this rain of half-eaten fruit is of no help to the tree in its quest to reproduce. Its seedlings have little luck of thriving here in the shadow of the parent's crown. Still, for the animals waiting below, it's manna from heaven. The coatis eat only the sweet flesh. They leave the seed intact. But others are waiting in the wings. Once the coatis have relieved their hunger, agoutis gingerly join the feast. Agoutis are rodents. They have teeth and jaws designed to gnaw right through the tough shell and devour the seed within. Squirrels, too, relish the giant seeds. Instead of creating new dipteryx trees, the seeds simply feed a host of hungry visitors. Even peccaries. Satiated, the coatis settle into some mutual grooming. In evening's golden light, butterflies and ants gorge upon the remains of the feast. It's been a good day for all the animals, but bad for the lordly dipteryx. Its potential offspring lie where they would have fallen anyway. Nothing has carried them away. Has the tree's survival strategy failed? Is the next generation lost? Is there no help under the sun for the dipteryx? Perhaps the moon can shed some light on the mystery of the dipteryx. Tropical nights weave their own magic and unveil a whole new cast of characters. Everywhere there are bats, conjured out of the dark. Among the branches hunts a marsupial, a marmosa. Its prey is pint-sized like itself. A katydid, camouflaged unsuccessfully as a leaf. Even while enjoying its meal, the marmosa must be wary. If it doesn't want to end up as dinner itself. Dipteryx seeds make a nutritious meal for a spiny rat, but a dangerous one as well. Gnawing on the tough seed makes enough noise to attract the unwelcome eye of a passing margay. The tiny forest cat enjoys its meal until disturbed by yet another denizen of the dark. Only at night does Elizabeth Calco venture out on her own quest. The Barrow, Colorado island she knows is very different from the one most people see.
The night is a totally different world from the daytime. You're just exposed to a wonderful orchestra of different sounds, of many insects and frogs. Then you see the stars through the canopy, and this is just an incredible atmosphere. And occasionally there are bats fluttering by and even touching you with their wings.
The night holds no fear for Elizabeth. She is in her element, and bats are her passion. She hangs nets of fine mesh over small streams, fishing for bats. She believes bats are the unsung heroes of the night, vital to the survival of dipteryx and many other tropical giants.
That's a short-tailed fruit bat, and although they are relatively easy to get out of the mist nets, one really has to be careful about their sharp teeth.
Bats rely on forest trees for food and shelter,
Picking your way through.
but they'll repay their hosts as they make their nightly rounds.
Legs are free. Whoops, don't bite me. Be nice. All right.
I don't think that bats are really ugly. I think that the misconception that bats are ugly comes from our very limited knowledge about bats. Most of the bats have very, very pretty faces, and especially here we find bats with beautiful facial stripes and colored ears, and they actually have large eyes and don't look ugly at all.
But a bat is much more than just a pretty face.
Sometimes when I set mist nets and bats fly in, they bring a fruit with them and drop them in the mist net, and so I can tell what kind of bat has taken what kind of fruit. Oh, I know what this bat had for dinner. Let's get it out of the mist net here. This is a fruit of the dipteryx. And the bat had carried the fruit in its mouth when it was hitting the mist net.
It turns out that the fate of our majestic dipteryx rests upon the soft wings of a little bat. Drawn by the scent of ripe fruit, artivious bats hover over the tree's canopy. Yet death lies in wait among these boughs. Luckily, the bat's ability to see in the dark using sound not only pinpoints the fruit, it warns it of the hidden boa. Once a bat locates a well-exposed fruit, it tears it off the stem and carries it away. Still, it's far too dangerous to eat it here. Only when it arrives at a safe roost, usually tucked under the fronds of a palm tree, does it stop to eat. Unknowingly, it has already performed a great service for our dipteryx. The bat has carried the fruit away from the dipteryx, beyond the reach of any diseases or parasites that may plague the parent tree. Once the bat gnaws off the sweet flesh, it lets the seed drop. Every night when the fruit is ripe, artivious bats make several visits to our tree. And each time they return to the safety of the same feeding roost to enjoy their meal. After each trip, another dipteryx seed joins the little mound forming just below. Curiously enough, in this heap of discards lies the tree's best hope for a successor. Morning's light has scarcely revealed the half-eaten fruit when they are discovered by an agouti. Have the precious seeds come this far only to be wasted? But the agouti can't possibly eat all that it has found, and what it does next adds another piece to the puzzle of how dipteryx manages to survive. With the dry season continuing, the agouti stashes the remaining seeds for the hard times to come. Much like a squirrel buries a nut, it carefully hides them, one by one. Yet there will always be some it doesn't need or simply forgets. Unwittingly, the agouti has now planted the next generation of a tropical giant. As the dry season on the island gets worse, many canopy trees actually shed their leaves in a tropical version of autumn. For months, streams have been draining water away, and torrid heat continues to rob the forest of precious moisture. The remaining water collects in ever-shrinking pools. More and more trees drop their leaves. It's a way to conserve water and cut their losses as the drought deepens. As always in the forest, there's an animal that's found a way to take advantage of every situation. It hides among the fallen leaves, disappearing in plain sight. A caterpillar masquerading as a dead leaf. But there's no hiding from the army ants. Since many small creatures disappear in the dry season, army ants are forced to tackle prey many times their own size. They overwhelm them by sheer force of numbers. Tree hoppers suck the remaining sap out of plants, but they're also under attack. A mother defends her brood from a wasp trying to steal one of her larvae for food. Each time the larvae wave their legs, calling out an alarm, the mother tree hopper strikes back at the wasp. By April, the dry season has turned cruel. Famine is only just kept at bay. The buds from the balsa tree are eaten before they can ever bloom. The whole forest seems to hold its breath, waiting for the rains. Over 8 feet of rain may fall during the wet season. The first good drenching triggers an avalanche of change. This wet new world is paradise for creatures water-loving and waterlogged. Stan Rand, renowned frogman, is used to working in a deluge, but it does have its drawbacks.
When you wear glasses such as I do, you don't see properly because your glasses get all wet from the rain on them, and then they get all steamed up inside and you can't see anything.
Luckily, sight is not the primary sense Stan uses in his work. To truly enter the frog's world, he must wait until dark and find his way through a landscape of sound.
What you hear are the voices of all these frogs, and on a good night there can be 14, 15, 17 different kinds of frogs, all calling at the same time, all audible from the same place.
Only the males call, each in search of a mate. To be heard and recognized above all this amorous bedlam is a challenge. Challenging, too, for Stan and his students.
Oh, there's Physalimos calling. Do you hear the leptodactylus, pentadactylus? Actually, it's amplitude modulated, but I can't do that.
Come on, Stan.
Uh-uh.
So what else? So what are these little, see all these little things?
Now those are little hyla, microcephala, that one. That was a red-eyed tree frog, the one that went flip, flip, flip.
What's the thing that's going?
Which one?
It's going like.
That one?
Yeah. That
Oh, that's Phrynohylas venulosa. That's a really neat frog. But be really careful if you touch it because it's
Why?
highly venomous. This is a young male pentadactylus. Like all frogs that eat live food, frogs and mice and insects and probably small birds. In fact, I know they eat small birds. And he's got a dorsal secretion that is really quite nasty. He got me. One of their defenses is this skin secretion.
For 30 years, Stan has lived in Panama, not far from BCI. He's become totally attuned to the ups and downs of a frog's life. He even understands why frogs use different calls at different times.
There's a Physalimos male. You can tell he's calling by himself because he's just giving a simple whine call. Ow. Ow. If another male came in and began to call, he'd change his call, adding chucks to the end. So he'd go, oh, chuck, chuck. And I can sometimes get him to answer me as if I were another male by waiting until he called. See, he went from going, oh, to, oh, chuck, oh, chuck. And now that I've stopped talking to him, he's gone back to the simple whines.
Male frogs make the added chuck sound to attract females. The females can tell from the pitch which male is the biggest and strongest. But male frogs have to think twice about sounding off, because females aren't the only ones out there listening to the chucks. Predators are too. So any male frog that wants to mate must gamble with his life. And with other bigger frogs nearby, a call can be a fatal attraction. But for those who survive long enough to mate, it's a gamble well worth taking. The male locks onto the female in a mating embrace. As he fertilizes the eggs, he whips the fluid released with the eggs into a meringue-like nest of bubbles. These tiny frogs mate in very shallow pools at the foot of dipteryx and other trees. The bubbles help keep the eggs moist and full of oxygen, and beyond the reach of aquatic predators. Sometimes several pairs will cooperate in creating a frothy nursery for their young. Red-eyed tree frogs protect their brood differently. They live high in the canopy, more at home on dipteryx's spreading branches than in a pond. They come down only when it's time to mate. Then they must get their young close to water. The males descend to the lower eaves of the tree, where they call to the larger females. After mounting the female, the male hangs on tight. She's off on a search for just the right place to lay her eggs. A leaf overhanging a small forest pool. Location is critical. If it's too low, her brood could be washed away by the next storm. Sometimes the eggs are laid as high as 30 feet up. The eggs are encased in a jelly-like mass, a gooey aquarium in which they'll develop into tiny tadpoles. Only then will they drop into the pool below. The young frogs rush to develop, and none too soon. A vine snake, 3 feet of elegant death. In just 4 days, the eggs have become recognizable tadpoles, but they're not ready to take the plunge yet. Even so, they may not have the luxury of waiting. At this stage, the tadpoles can hatch, but in just a few more days, their tails will be much longer, allowing them to swim better. And once they're in the pond, they'll need to be good swimmers. Fish will find the premature tadpoles easy pickings. It's a deadly dilemma. Risk the snake's bite, or leap into the waiting mouths of the fish below. As if the fish weren't enough, the tadpoles must contend with this monster in miniature. A dragonfly nymph, a youngster itself, is one of the fiercest creatures in this realm. But there will always be some who sidestep instant death and live to return to the trees. Despite all appearances to the contrary, even the dragonfly nymph will be transformed someday soon and take to the tropical air. Waking to a misty morning is an island wrapped in enchantment. The rains have cast their spell, And in the soil, the seeds of our dipteryx await a rebirth. But before that can happen, the forest must change once more. A carpet of forest litter, preserved in the dry air. Now moisture melts it away. In just a few days, the nutrients locked away in the dead leaves will be restored to the living. Fungi and molds course over the withered remains. Fungi are the middlemen, mining the bodies of the dead for riches which they supply to the living. Here, everything is recycled as a new generation rises from the moist earth. The seedlings respond in rhythm, spreading their leaves to catch the daylight, folding them at dark. Young vines grope for support. They've traded strength for length and need help to climb towards the sky. But wherever they grow, they can't escape the hordes of hungry mouths that surround them. To protect themselves from being eaten, many tropical plants lace their foliage with poisons. But these new leaves haven't had the time to mount their chemical defense. Yet in the tropics, poison to one is a treat for another. There's always some insect that can find an antidote to a plant's toxins, and from then on, it will be the only one they eat. Leafcutter ants have found another strategy. An army of workers seeks out only non-toxic plants, any and all they can find. All herbivores are living recycling plants. They absorb just a small fraction of what they eat. The rest they return as manure, rich fertilizer that feeds the growth of the forest. Unless it gets hijacked by a pair of industrious dung beetles. A monkey dropping is a mother lode for the dung beetles, who fashion it into a ball, a combination pantry and nursery for their young. They roll their stash away, looking for a place to bury it among all the new growth. A baby dipteryx enters this complex and competitive world. It started life as a tiny flower in the canopy, where it was pollinated and ripened into a fruit. It was carried away in the claws of a bat who ate its flesh and discarded the seed. It was buried alive by an agouti and has lain in wait for the rains for months. Now, its time has come. Only 1 in 1,000 ever gets this far. The huge seed stored enough energy to unfurl a giant among seedlings, 9 inches tall with lots of green. Lots of juicy green. But it is not a delicacy. Not even a food of first choice. But when other juicy edibles become scarce, baby Dipteryx does end up on the menu. The parent tree has spent centuries growing hundreds of feet and preparing millions of fruit, so at least one offspring will survive to reach the canopy. Yet all that effort can be gobbled up in seconds. It will never survive being stripped bare, and even those who remain intact need luck to prevail. They must have light to live, and light is hard to come by on the forest floor. Each and every ray must penetrate layers of foliage to reach a seedling below. Animals can search out light, but the seedlings, rooted in place, must wait for the sun. They make do with sun specks that flicker over the forest floor, illuminating them for just minutes each day. Even if it gets its moment in the sun, the fall of a single leaf can seal a seedling's doom. A new day in the forest sometimes brings disaster. If a new tree is to thrive, another must fall. For the plants that have struggled to survive in its shadow, perhaps for decades, this is a reprieve from a dark prison. A light gap has been torn in the fabric of the canopy. It has been centuries since this spot saw broad daylight. For seedlings starved for the sun, it is a chance to grow and flourish. A race for the life-giving light has begun. There will be winners and losers as each plant tries to crowd out its neighbors. Into the new light comes another creature, biologist Phil DeVries. Phil studies the world of the light gap, and he's discovered some astonishing relationships here.
Since I've been a small child, I notice plants and I notice insects. I like being in nature and I like forests a lot. I can think of nothing more enjoyable than being surrounded completely on all sides, and I literally mean up, down, any direction, with life, and that's what being in a tropical rainforest is all about.
His love for this forest world is neatly matched to his quick eye and insatiable curiosity.
I observe as much as I possibly can, and effectively what you're doing is you're asking, hello, organism, what are you doing for a living? And who do you interact with while you're out here doing your duties as a butterfly or an ant or a lizard or a plant? And I can use butterflies literally to move around in the forest and tell me what the vegetation is like.
Phil has uncovered a light gap plant called a croton that's developed an unexpected relationship with two different insects, an ant and a butterfly caterpillar.
Croton provides sugar secretions which attracts ants to little nectaries. And the ants, when they're on the plant, deter herbivores, that is, insects that eat leaves.
The plant actually uses ants to guard its vulnerable leaves, bribing them with a sugary nectar. The ants keep away any insect that might do their meal ticket harm.
However, this is really what I'm looking for. It's an herbivore as well, but the ants don't bother it because it produces sugar secretions of its own.
The butterfly caterpillar uses its sugar secretions just as the plant does, as a tasty bribe. It keeps the ants well fed in exchange for their protection.
The funny thing about this butterfly caterpillar is that it bribes these ants with the sugar secretion, and the ants act like guard dogs and help protect it from its own predators. In addition to producing sugar secretions for the ants, this caterpillar has another trick that's even more magic.
Phil has made another remarkable discovery. These caterpillars can actually sing. To capture this amazing talent, Phil has designed special audio equipment to record its calls.
This gear I have here is an amplifier and a very, very sensitive microphone. I use this to listen to, well, basically sounds that nobody else can hear. And I'm listening to this caterpillar singing at the moment. And how these caterpillars produce their songs is pretty interesting, in that on the top of their head, there are long ridges. And right above the head, there's a collar, where there are two little rods. And the two rods beat up and down on top of the head. And then the head moves in and out. And these little rods have little rings on them. And what they do is they hit the top of the head, and then that's rasping back and forth like a Latin American percussion instrument, a guiro. I think it's fair to say, without gloating too much, I have the world's largest collection of caterpillar calls. Now let's see what happens when we reintroduce this caterpillar to the ants.
Upon its return, the caterpillar puts its musical ability to another surprising use, mimicking the calls of ants. The ants respond as we would if we heard a cry for help. They rush over immediately, and help is always welcome. Danger is never far away. This guard ant earns its keep. An assassin bug could skewer the caterpillar and suck it dry. But it's no match for the ant. A parasitic wasp fares no better. In the tropical forest, every creature lives within an intricate web, shifting always between harmony and struggle.
The lesson that I've learned is that it's probably just scratching the surface of the number of interactions that you have in any light gap in the tropics. The picture that emerges from there is of staggering complexity when you think about how many species there are of plants in the tropics and insects in the tropics. It's very humbling to realize that even though I know a little bit, within the context of a tropical rainforest, I know absolutely nothing.
This little dipteryx, of course, also knows nothing of the complex network of relationships that have brought it into the light. So far, it has beaten the odds, and if its luck holds out, it may someday become a forest titan itself. Dipteryx, large and small, is at the heart of a glorious pattern of forest life. Unveiling this grand design remains the quest of scientists of Barrow, Colorado Island. A labor of love and a journey of many lifetimes.